Huntsworm hat. It's been a while. I've been on vacation kind of, and so I've been doing a lot of driving. And it's if you're doing a lot of driving across country, it's very good for population hoax and power plant hoax. So that's mostly what this video is about. Also, just chemtrail stuff. So I'll start with that. So on my drive, it was really interesting. It seems like they're trailing in really strange ways these days. Like it seems a little bit different, like really obvious. You'd have to be so asleep to not be awake to this stuff. But tell me if you guys have seen this. Sometimes they're really low, but then sometimes they seem like they're really, really high up. And what makes me realize this when I'm driving, so sometimes it just feels that way. Sometimes you look up and you're like, that trail is like right over me. You can just tell it's so close. Um, and so when I was driving, yeah, some of the trails would stay in the sky in the same exact spot for a really, really, really long time. And then sometimes you see a trail and you just pass right under it. So just the optics of this place. I mean, we're surrounded by a dome, so there's probably a lot of optical properties that we just don't know about. But anyways, one of these, it was like an X marks the spot in the sky. And so I was watching it because I was driving just in the same direction for hours. And there was this obvious chemtrail X marks the spot in the sky. And so I was just watching it. And then all of a sudden, a bright light appeared. Like a star. Looked like a star. Right next to the X marks the spot in the sky. Yeah. It was like they knew. Oh, there was going to be this thing in the sky. That's at least what it felt like. It was, and it appeared, and it was very bright, like a super bright star, and then it just eventually disappeared. And my wife even saw it too, and so I was glad that she saw it. I wasn't the only one to see it. It was very present, very noticeable, and it was like they tried to block it with this X marks the spot in the sky, but they like kind of missed a little bit. And right to the where I'm at today, because what I think normally the chemtrails is just like weather manipulation, keeping the temperature down because the sun is so bright and hot. But sometimes it looks like strategic, like blocking areas of the sky. And then sometimes it's like they just don't even want you looking at the sky that day. So they just you get silver scad. But that was something new for me. I've never seen like an X marks the spot and then a bright light. So let me know if you've maybe seen that before. It's like they knew that that was gonna appear and it was quick. It was like 30 seconds. It was bright, and then, but I was driving and it was right in my field of vision, and it was like a X chemtrail in the sky. So of course I'm gonna watch that. And so that's the chemtrail story. And so I was driving across California. Huge. It's supposed to be the most populous place in the U.S., but it's just huge amounts of empty land. The world's not overpopulated, and it's probably depopulated these days. Back in the day, people used to have huge families, and these days people think having 2 children is like the max. People look at me weird when I'm like, we're having more than 2 children. It's like a faux pas these days, and that's just New World Order. It's straight off the Georgia Guidestones. That and think about just the way that we live. Everything about the way that we live is there to reinforce this overpopulation hoax. Cookie cutter houses in these huge lots where nobody has any room, and that's not how people used to live. And just the numbers today, I think it's just one of those things that nobody has actually sit down and ever counted out 1 million people to see how many people that is. That's a lot of people. And the Bible even has huge population numbers that are nearing 1 million. So I feel like there could be pretty much the same amount of people today that there were in biblical times. It doesn't Just take a drive across the country and you'll see nothing but empty land everywhere. Just the cities. They just cram everybody into cities. And then they tell you that there's 7 billion of us. Nobody sat down and counted them. I'm sure Satan wants to know, because that is why they do all the censusing and things like that. Satan wants to be like, oh, know everything, know where everybody is. But it's got to be way less than 7 billion. I don't have any ideas for the number. It's just drive around and realize that we're not overpopulated. There's major highways. So the Interstate 5, the I-5, is like the only way to drive up the West Coast. But it's only 2 lanes each way. How are we supposed to be as populated as they say that we are? If there's only 2 lanes, basically that's the only way to go up the West Coast. So I don't know. I don't have any ideas for how many people there are, but they lie about it. And so I'll just end with the power plant hoax. Guess how many power plants I saw on all of my driving? 0. Well, okay, that's not true. But I'm saying, where are all the coal power plants? Where are all the natural gas power plants? Where are the nuclear power plants? And if they ever are there, so the best explanation I've heard is that what they call power plants are just weather manipulation, just the cooling towers. It's just putting a bunch of water vapor in the atmosphere. Probably. I think it's just Disneyland. They need to build them because people are going to be asking questions. Hey, where are all the power plants? But just pay attention to power lines, how many there are, how redundant power lines are. So often you'll see like 2 or 3 or 4 rows of power lines everywhere. And that's how they're collecting the power. Think of the kite on a string in the atmosphere with the key. Okay, the key to power is like putting these strings in the air. That's what that story is all about. And just start paying attention to how many power lines there are everywhere. That's how they collect the power. And then they have all these substations. And so I don't have it all figured out. I never pretend to have it all figured out, but you can just, if you start paying attention, you'll just see, hey, wait a minute. These power lines are everywhere. It's not just distributing the power. They have power grids. They just have huge areas of tons of power lines. If you go to downtown areas, the alleyways are full of power lines. Every alleyway, it's just, you can tell it's not only used to distribute power. The grid itself is what makes the power. And that's just another thing that was very obvious when you're driving across country. There's no power plants, and there's just power lines everywhere. Also, I'm pretty sure wind turbines are just a prop. I don't think they're not generating power. It wasn't even windy, so because during this trip, I passed some wind turbines. It wasn't even windy out. There wasn't even any. It was still, but this thing was just like churning at a constant rate. It's just Disneyland. Wind power probably takes power to run that stuff. But it is a tower, so maybe it generates power just because it's so tall. The spinny part is probably just secondary. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed this, and it feels good to make a video. Alright, God bless everybody.